All right, so hello and welcome back. Today we're going to take the look at the Republican Roman Legion by Cimentari uh, Sangmangata. I can't say his name, but I will leave his video in the description. Please go check this channel out. There's a lot of good stuff on there, and a lot of it is not covered. So, without further ado, here we go.
The Field of Mars, named after the god of war, was the symbol of Roman military, the place where legions were raised, trained, and held their military triumph after a successful campaign. The 2-kilometer wide floodplain of the river Tiber had no buildings except a small altar of Mars. The campus was the muster and training area of the Roman army during the kingdom and most of the Republic.
And this is important to remember. The Campus Marius, it's on the outside of Rome, and when they mean it's like, when you think of Rome, you don't think of like it's just Rome. But back then, during the Republican era and the Kingdom era, it really was Rome, the city of Rome. Later, during like the late Republic and into the Empire, this changes dramatically. But beforehand, all Romans from the city of Rome had to be Roman to join the army. There were different. Now, if Rome's territory expanded, this didn't mean that they were automatically Roman citizens. That's not what that meant. It meant that they were allies. Now, allies could send troops, but they were totally different, and they didn't have to do this whole thing.
Along with the expansion of Rome, victorious generals built various temples, monuments, and theatres, transforming the campus into a collection of trophies and gradually changing its military role into an area that made a social and military statement.
Also, fun fact: this is where you get campus from. Campus Martorius, right? Roman or Latin, actually, I think at this point. And now, campus. If you go to the campus on a university or your university campus, that's what it's talking about. The Romans, esteeming at it as the most sacred place, have there erected funeral monuments to the most illustrious persons.
In the 6th century BC, King Servius Tullius held the first census, assembling all landowning citizens of Rome by tribe in the Campus Martius in order to register their property and income. The census established the classes based on wealth, which formed the structure of both Rome's society and army.
This is important. This is where we get the census from. Yeah, we get a lot of stuff from Rome. And doing it by tribe, very complicated. Probably could do a whole video on it. Very oversimplification. Tribes were where you were born and whose son you were or daughter you were, and how much money you had. It's very complicated, and I don't have time to get into it, and I don't remember most of it. So there you go.
Following the model of its time, the early Roman army was based on an annual citizens' levy and structured into income-based military classes. The constant military activity and gradual expansion of Rome led to an increased need in manpower. Towards the 3rd century BC, the infantry classes based on wealth were slowly replaced with ones based on age and military experience, thus enlarging the base of recruitment for the Roman army.
That makes sense, right? Money, is a limiting factor, especially if you're going into a lot of wars. Age and experience, again, for military sense, it does trump, money more or less.
Polybius describes how the legions were levied and structured during this period.
The consuls, so the two people in Rome that were basically the president and prime minister, very oversimplification, but the people in charge, Um, when they were about to enroll soldiers, announced a meeting of the popular assembly, the day of which all Roman citizens of military age must present themselves, and they would do this annually. So basically, it's just like you were called up for selective service, so you're conscripted, and you have to go up, show up here, annually, and then you have to present yourself, how much money you have, what you're doing, all that stuff.
The two elected consuls of Rome required all to assemble on the Capitolina, arranged by tribe for the Delectus, the annual levy of troops.
From each tribe, name first of all select four lads, or of more or less the same age and physique.
Groups of 4 men were selected from each tribe and brought forward in front of the tribunes of the 4 legions.
So the tribunes of the 4 legions. Well, man, I'm not that familiar with Roman history, but this sounds like the elected person of the legion to enroll them.
Each of the tribunes picked a man, assigning him to one of the 4 legions. The process was repeated until all legions were filled with 4,200 men respectively.
When they have chosen the number determined on that, it is when the strength of each legion is brought up to 4,200, or in times of exceptional danger, up to 5,000.
Another 300 men for each legion were selected from the wealthiest class to form the equites, the Roman cavalry.
When they come to the rendezvous, they choose the youngest and poorest of them to form the velites. This is true. Next to them are made the hastati. Those in the primes of their life are the principes. So the primes of their lives would be like 25 to 30. And maybe even later, maybe 32. But those are the primes of their lives. The poorest, the youngest and poorest, are like 16 to 20 would form the velites, and then 20 to 24, 25 would be the hastati. And the oldest of all triarii being men among the Romes of the four classes in each legion, distinct in age and equipment. So the triarii, minimum age is like 35. Max age, probably 45, 50. They're the guys that have seen a lot of experience, and they have a lot of money, and they've accumulated all of that over their lives. And they're the backbone of the army, more or less.
The skirmishers, slingers, or archers represented the lowest military class in every ancient army, troops that could not afford a proper fighting panoply. During mid-Republic, the Roman army united all those classes under the velites, formed by the youngest and poorest citizens, wearing no armor at all, except a bronze helmet and sometimes a wolfskin as a sign of recognition.
And that's true. They didn't actually wear the wolf skins, unlike some people think, to scare the enemy. No. It was to make sure they didn't friendly fire your ass. Because these guys, the skirmishers, are in front of the entire legion, and they're throwing javelins at the enemy skirmishers, and they're running back and forth. When you do this, you need a way to know that you are friendly and not an enemy, skirmisher, so the legion doesn't actually, kick your ass and kill you. And as I said, the youngest and poorest, youngest soldiers, or velites, ordered to carry a sword, javelin, and a target, parma, which is a shield that they have. They also wear a plain helmet and sometimes covered it with a wolfskin or something similar to protect and to act as a distinguishing mark. And notice, they said they had no armor. But you want to know what they have? They have this thing on their head. It's called a helmet. So movies, please have your actors wear a goddamn helmet. They can have a helmet they can have a helmet where you can see their entire face as long as they have a helmet. You get bashed in the head, you're dead. You get bashed in your arm, you may lose the arm and you may have a broken arm, or they may have to cut it off. You get bashed in the head with a mace or a skull or a sword, you're dead. It's very simple.
Armed with a round Parma shield and javelins, the 1,200 velites had the task to skirmish and harass the enemy prior to the engagement. 3 classes of heavy infantry formed the main body of the Roman legion. The hastati, the youngest and least experienced troops among the infantry class, formed the first infantry line.
The next in seniority, called hastati, are ordered to wear a complete palanpoi, which is that little thing A square thing, literally plate. Think of like a plate carrier today in the modern sense. That's literally what it is. It protects your absolute vital organs. That's why plate carriers today, don't cover all the way to your stomach and guts. It doesn't do that. It protects your heart and your lungs, okay? And maybe your liver, maybe. But that's it. Past that point, it doesn't matter. That's why it's like that shape. Besides the shield, they also carry a sword hanging on their right thigh called a Spanish sword. We all know it's called the Roman sword, the the gladius. In addition, they have two pila and a brass helmet and greaves. The shield really does protect you. If you see how big, if you actually go and get one, or see them in reenactments, they actually are very big. And they protect you a lot. And the greaves are just so like you don't get like, because if you put your foot forward when you're wearing the shield to like block something, someone can slash your leg, and then if you get slashed in the leg, what do? You drop your shield and then you die. So that's why greaves are, and greaves aren't that greaves are not actually that hard to make. I mean, you just make it to they have to be fitted to you. That's the problem. But besides that, they're actually not that hard to make.
They were armed with a gladius sword and two throwing pila. The Hastati were lightly armoured, carrying a large scutum shield, a helmet and a bronze square breastplate covering their chest. 1,200 Hastati were divided in 10 maniples of 120 men each. The second infantry line, organised in the same manner, formed by middle-aged men, was the Principes.
The Principes and the Triarii are armed in the same manner, except that instead of the pila, the Triarii carry long spears hasta. We'll get back to that, but the Principes, yeah. So again, they're just, they're more experienced guys. They have more money, so now they can wear Lorica Hamada, which is chainmail, which they got from the Gauls. And they have their gladius, and they have their pugia, which is the little dagger they have. They have their pila, and they have their shield. They're just basically what the Roman legion will actually come into in the empire. In the very late Roman and, not even very late Roman, just Roman Republic, after this point, after Marius' reforms, they will basically try to become this, everyone.
Armed in the same manner as the Hastati, with sword and throwing javelins, the Principes had slightly better armour. They were usually equipped with the Lorica Hamata chainmail. The most aged and experienced were chosen to form the Triarii. Armed with a Hastath spear, a gladius sword, and a large scutum, the Triarii could afford the best armour and were considered the last line of defence of the Roman legion. Because those troops were used as a last resort in a battle situation, the expression ad trios redis, falling on the Triarii, became a common Roman phrase, indicating one to be in a desperate situation.
And that is true, because there's not that many Triarii. I think there's like a 300, 500 in the entire legion. And again, they have the best gear possible. Well, the bronze breastplate, okay. Lorica Hamada probably would protect you better, but you look better in, breastplate like that. And I don't know. Maybe the breastplate does offer more protection from piercing attacks, unlike the chainmail, but I don't know. But you see their helmet. It has a lot of fluff on it. It's got two feathers. It's got a crest, and it's got, even more like horsetails on it. And it's slanted down, like that. This is it is an imitation or a corruption of the old Spartan helmet, the Corinthian helmet. Spartans, you watch 300, you know what the Corinthian helmet is that, down. Now, a lot of Greek art depicted them wearing it up, right? Slightly up, so it just looks like that, like in art. And that's what they're trying to imitate, because it looks very stylish. Again, people liked style back then, so it looked very stylish to wear it like that. There's an offer protect, because it can't actually come down. It's like a fake. It's like it has a little visor crest, but it can't actually come down. It's just like that. It's actually not like a helmet. It's still a pretty good helmet. Just not a Corinthian, just a corruption of it. So yeah, there you go.
600 Triarii were in every legion, in 10 maniples of 60 men each. The cavalry force of the legion was comprised of 300 equites, chosen from the wealthy class of Roman citizens.
The censor selecting them according to their wealth, and 300 acres assigned to each legion. So yeah, you had to be very wealthy to own a horse. Back then, especially, you had to be very wealthy. Even today, just today, let's take this for example. Can you pay for a horse today by yourself? Most of you will probably answer, no, I can't afford a barn, I can't afford land, and I can't afford to feed this thing and have it taken care of. just like back then. Not many people could, and they were even more expensive back then.
Divided into 10 terma, armed with a long spear and a small palmar shield. The equites were assigned a support role, since the Roman military doctrine was mainly based around the infantry. "4,500 men in total formed a legion, 4,200 infantry, and 300 cavalry, although there were times when this number was increased up to 5,000. Each of the two consuls had the command of 2 legions, which formed a consular army. 4 legions and 2 consular armies was the standard strength of the Roman Republic.
And that's their entire strength. That's everyone. That's, if you use the 5,000 number, let's say it's an extreme emergency, that's 20,000 people. That's it. That's the entire Roman army in the Republic and the early Republic and the Kingdom era. That's it. Allied troops made up the rest of them, which we'll probably won't get into, but just think of, they kind of copied the Romans and they kind of did their own thing.
In times of emergency, elders and slaves of freed men were conscripted into service to raise the number of legions. The flexible Roman military system allowed them to constantly adapt their tactics and weaponry as a result of clashes with the various warlike cultures. Much of the Roman equipment is actually of foreign origin, incorporated by Rome to their fighting system. The Greek-type swords used by the early legions were gradually replaced by the gladius hispaniensis, which became the standard Roman sword around the 3rd century BC, with a 60-centimeter long, double-edged straight blade. The gladius was ideal for quick, short stabbings from behind the large scutum.
We got this. Hispanius basically means Hispania, which modern-day Spain.
While being capable of delivering effective slash hits, the sword remained in service for a few centuries until the Imperial Reforms.
And the Imperial Reforms, it depends, because the gladius, it changes from the gladius hispaniana to the gladius, I think there's a Greek version of it. There are different versions of the gladius, and it also goes to the spada, which is basically just a longer sword. Better for actually fighting 1-to-1 rather than in a formation, but that's later.
The hasta, Latin word for spear, was the primary weapon used by the Triarii. Resembling the Greek spear dory, the hasta was a 2 meters long thrusting spear with an iron head. The hasta was eventually scrapped along with the Marian reforms from 107 BC.
And one of the reasons is if you have a shield like that and you're close with a sword, you can do a lot more damage. A spear is still good. Don't get you wrong. A spear should still kill you and it's still effective. It's just the Romans went with a sword, more or less.
The short leaf-shaped blade dagger Pugio was the sidearm of all Roman soldiers. Like the gladius, the Pugio was in the panoply of all military classes, although it was also the weapon of choice for assassinations, including the famous stabbing of Julius Caesar in the Senate.
And the reason you have a dagger is very simple. Dagger can be used for a variety of reasons in camp life. You need to cut something, open something, stab something, cut through something, blah, blah, blah. There you go. You can use that instead of your primary weapon. And if your primary weapon either gets knocked out of your hand, breaks when you hit someone, or you hit their armor and it breaks, which can happen, by the way. It's not like an insignificant event when that does happen, so it can happen. You can then draw your sidearm, which is your Pugio, and so you have something to defend yourself with.
The pilum, a heavy javelin used by the Roman infantry, was primarily used to disrupt enemy formations right before the charge. With its 60 centimeter long, 7 millimeter thin iron shaft and a small pyramid-shaped point, the pilum had great penetration power. It is believed the pilum was designed to penetrate and bend on impact, rendering enemy shields useless, although this view is disputed. According to Polybius, 2 pilot types were available to the Hastati and Principes, one heavier than the other, to use as a thrusting spear or defense against cavalry, as it is described in the Battle of Pharsalos or the Siege of Alesia. Due to its efficiency, the pilum remained in service after the Marian reforms. It was eventually replaced during the Imperial Age.
And this is true, and everything you said about this is true. These little things right here are basically little wood screws. So there was an iron screw, I think, and a wood screw, which is why some people think that it bent like this. And the reason it bends like this is so that you can no longer use your shield. If it bends like that and on your shield, you can't pull it out very effectively, very fast at all. So you have to throw your shield away in the charge, right? So if you're charging the Romans, they throw this. It hits your shield. Your shield is now useless because it has this piece of javelin in it. So you got to throw it away. Then they have a second pilum, as he described. We're unsure if this is like if they had two pilums like this, but we're pretty sure. And then a second pilum that's heavier. The heavier one you grab right before they're like 20 yards away, and then you huck this thing right before the charge. You get charged, or you're charging into them, and then it could do more damage because they don't have their shield. Because remember, this first one broke their shield, then this hits them. So that's that.
Remained in service after the Marian reforms. It was eventually replaced during the Imperial Age. The light javelins used by the velites had a similar design as the pilum. It was smaller in size, roughly 1.1 meters long. Up to 7 veruta could be carried by each velite in combat and were occasionally thrown using a strap called a mentum. The round wood shields.
And what he means by a strap, and it's like a I can't describe it with both hands because I'm not going to one. But think of like a leather loop, and you can loop it around like the a little bit of the javelin. Many African tribes still do this today, and then basically it lets you propel it further if you throw it. It's basically like a little launching device, so you can throw it off, and it's basically attached to your hand. So it's actually a pretty good idea and a very decent invention.
Were mainly used by velites, although cavalry used a similar version, the Parma equestris. About 90 centimeters in diameter, the Parma had iron in its frame and also an iron shield boss called umbro, protecting the hand grip. The scutum, used by the Italic tribes, was adopted by the Romans around 4th century BC, when the early phalanx system was replaced with the manipular one. Around 1 meter in height and 40 centimeters wide, the rectangle curved shield was made from 3 layers of wood. They were glued together at right angles and were covered with an outside layer of leather, which was painted with various motifs. An iron rim held the shield in place, giving it extra protection against lateral blows, and an iron boss in the center of the shield. Most common among the armors in use during the Republican period was the lorica hamata, a chainmail probably adopted from Gallic or Iberic tribes. It was made of iron rings that allowed for relatively easy movements while offering good protection.
We need like Gallic and Iberic tribes. So Gaul at this point is France, more or less. Hispanic or Hispania is, Spain.
The troops who could not afford this used a simple bronze plate, which was placed on the tunic to offer some form of chest protection. Greaves were also used to protect the legs. Some soldiers wore only one greave on the left foot.
The wearing the one greave on the left foot actually makes sense. Because again, everyone's right-handed back in this time period. So, if you step forward with your left foot, right, and your shield's on your left side because your right arm is your strongest because you're your dominant hand, okay, and you're thrusting, having your left shield and having one greave on your left foot is enough protection because your right foot, if you think about it, if you're stabbing like this, or you're stabbing with your shield out there and you're stabbing this way, your right foot is back. Okay, it's actually back to give you more thrusting foot like power forward, so you can thrust forward. And that's why it's just lighter to do so, and it also costs less. Now, would I probably want to wear 2 greaves? Yeah, probably, but to each his own.
The one nearest to the enemy. The so-called Montefertino helmet was considered to be the common helmet in use during Republican times. Of Celtic origins, the Montefertino had a conical or round shape with a raised knob and cheek plates to protect the sides of the head. A similar version, also of Celtic influence, was the Culus helmet.
And these helmets didn't go away. They lasted until like the late Republic and then early Empire. If you were, you could give this helmet to your son, and he could use it again. Helmets are expensive. They're not just things you throw away. There'd be a mishmash of different helmet types, bronze, coolest, different helmet types, different quality, different if they're iron or bronze. Again, with the Monte Vatino and the coolest, you could see both of them in the same unit, in the same century. You could see the same. You could see two different helmets all the time.
During the Samnite Wars in the 4th century BC, Rome decided to change the rigid Greek phalanx-based legion with a more flexible system, which
The Samnites were people that were north of the Romans, and they had a very distinct language and culture, and it's been wiped out, unfortunately. Um, Apparently, we can't even read their actual language because there's nothing before it. It was like actually completely different, which is sad.
was more appropriate for battles in the mountainous, rugged terrain of the Samian region. Influenced by the mobile fighting units system of their Samnite enemies, the Romans adapted it to the three lines manipula system.
And this is something Rome does all the time: adapt whatever works for the enemy into the legion. If the line system's not working because the Samnites are using different smaller units because it's hilly terrain, let's do so. The Romans were very able to effectively ditch things that didn't work and adapt things that did.
Triplex Acies, Latin for three lines, is the term used to describe the Republican Manipula Legion fighting tactic. The maniples deployed in three battle lines, arranged in a checkboard formation. The tactical building block that ensured success of the Triplex Acies was the maniple, a small unit of 120 men, called comanipularies, commanded by 2 centurions, each in charge of 60 men. The various fighting formations usually associated with the later Marian legions were most likely in use as well in the Manipula Legion, as some of Levy's battle descriptions suggest. In the testudo formation, the first row brought up their shields aligned, while the next ranks raised their shields, creating a closed-back formation to protect the soldiers of missile fire from all sides.
And a centurion, if you're unfamiliar, is basically their commanding officer. He's an NCO, he's not an actual noble, but he's commanding these guys.
The wedge, a common tactic among ancient armies, assumed the maniple advancing in a V-shaped formation, meant to break an enemy line.
And it's very simple. If you can punch through this, because again, units usually, if they're receiving an attack, will start to bend. Like think of your cup in my hand. I don't know if you can actually see this, but if it's straight like this, that's what it is on contact, and then it will start to slowly cup in, right, from getting attacked. So it'll slowly start cupping in that way, while you're using a V formation to break it.
Repellia equites, Latin for repel cavalry, was the formation used to defend against a cavalry charge. The first row would kneel, holding their pila as spears between their shield, and the second row would raise their shields and pila to create a defensive pike wall. A common tactic widely considered was the men rotating within the unit.
Now, so that was a very good demonstration of against anti-cavalry. I mean, if the cavalry slams into this unit, you have, 3 guys behind you if you're the second man. So you have 6 guys in total. So they're not going to get through very easily. We'll let them continue.
The ranks switched their positions during the battle in order to avoid prolonged battle fatigue. The first rank would disengage and retreat in the back of the maniple, while the second rank advanced in its place.
And this is key. This is actually shown in the Rome HBO show in the very first episode, in the very first actual few minutes, is, again, the centurion has a whistle. They had whistles. He blows it. The first guy rotates, just like in the show. They step to the left, rotates back. All of these guys are grabbing them by the backs. Now, we're unsure, because, Lorca Hamada doesn't actually have a little grab strap, but I wouldn't be surprised if every soldier just, put a little piece of leather to, have a grab hold like we do today on plate carriers. A lot of modern-day plate carriers have a little grab hold thing so you can drag a guy back if you get shot. I wouldn't be surprised if they all had grab straps. But anyway, when you do this and you have 6 men, what do? If you blow the whistle, you only have to fight for 10 minutes in an hour. That's it. And if he keeps, he can determine, the centurion can determine how long he's gonna, let you fight for. But usually in an hour, if there's 6 men, you only have to fight for 10 minutes, blow the whistle, and then, you have a 15-minute break. So yeah, very, very, very efficient. A lot of Rome's opponents didn't do this because the guys in the front would either die or they'd win. And then, but they'd get exhausted and continuously exhausted from continuing to keep having to fight. By far, to my knowledge, Rome was the only actual people that did this with the rotating system, and it's very efficient when it's actually done this way.
Within the maniple, according to Polybius's description, each man had 3 square feet available to fight. The large scutum shield provided enough individual protection for each soldier, offering a degree of individual freedom to maneuver. This allowed the maniple to rotate a single row in order to defend its flank and still keep their formation without the need to rotate the whole unit in order to meet an attack.
And it's a very ingenious design when you think about it. If they get hit in the side, these guys can literally just rotate on the spot and fight them off. Now, again, getting hit in the side, even for Rome, it's basically still game over, but you have something.
Those factors made the maniple a more independent unit, giving the Roman legion more tactical options during both the advance and engagement phase.
Now, he may cover this, but we are still unsure as to why this formation was the way it was. Our best guess is that the front line could easily go through these little gaps and then fall behind and then let the other guys take forward. Or if they're getting pushed, these little detachments can shore up a line. That is our best guess as to why this formation was used. But we're unsure totally, but best guess is probably right, is if the unit is getting hit and they're overwhelmed, these guys can fill in. And then if these units need to disengage, they can go through these little things, little gaps, and, go in the back.
With no constraint of keeping a long fixed line formation, the Roman legion had a distinct mobility advantage on rough terrain over the phalanx system, whose ability to maneuver and keep its formation was very restricted, as the Battle of Cynocephalae or Pydna illustrates.
Again, the skirmishers are in the front. They're going to engage enemy skirmishers. This is the actual legion, and these little arrows are the cavalry. And to our best guess, this is, again, why the gaps are, because you can't actually go through this, because if it's a phalanx, they all have their spears lowered. You can't actually do it. You have to go all the way around. This leads the velites, they can easily go through the gap.
Ancient sources depict various moments where a number of maniples joined to form small army groups to maneuver to a flank or to reinforce a position. Parts of the army could easily disengage and redirect to different battle points, reform and readjust the triplex acies during battle without endangering the battle line. During the Iberian campaigns from the late 3rd century BC, the terrain and guerrilla fighting style of the Iberic tribes proved the maniple to be too light for certain situations. This led to the use of small combined mobile forces of 3 maniples, one of each category, and the support of some velites. Those are mentioned by Livy and Polybius as cohorts, 3 maniples of 400 to 500 soldiers of combined arms that...
Now, the cohort will go on to be formed in the later Republic, and the velites. This I didn't actually know this with them forming into units like this to be called a cohort
of combined arms that work together as an individual group. The cohorts slowly started to be used in the Roman army, eventually becoming a standard unit of the Roman legion in 107 BC when the Marian reforms took place. The Manipular Legion was battle-tested against various fighting styles, acting over the centuries as Rome's last line of defense against the Italic tribes or invaders from outside of the Italic peninsula, like Pyrrhus and Hannibal. Although it suffered its share of defeats, the Manipular system always prevailed in the end. securing Rome's survival in times of need, contributing to Rome's expansion as a regional power, paving the way for the later Marian legions, the famous Roman military machine that created the Roman Empire. Thank you for watching,
And that is true. So
and please subscribe to our channel.
yes, please go subscribe to their channel. It's amazing the content they have for this. And they're actually not that big. And there's one last thing I'd like to point out. These velites didn't actually just sit back here and do nothing. When the lines were engaged, these guys would run orders. They would run water. They would get casualties. They'd bring them back. There's a lot that after the skirmishers threw their javelins that they were doing. They weren't just actually sitting there. Let's put it that way. So hope you guys like my reaction to that. Please go check out their channel. I linked it in the description with the original video. Other than that, I'll see you people in the next video.